The woman didn't look up when Evan approached. She was already comfortable, shoes off, legs stretched across the armrest of the adjacent seat, phone held overhead like a scepter she'd been born holding. She had the practiced ease of someone who'd never once been asked to make room, and she wore it like a second skin. Evan Cole stopped at row 2 and checked the number overhead. Then he looked at the woman in his seat, then back at the number. He'd flown over 200 times in the last 3 years. He'd sat in first class in 41 cities across 4 continents. He knew what his seat looked like. He knew what it felt like when someone was in it. "Excuse me." His voice was quiet, measured, the kind of quiet that had a history behind it, closed boardrooms, ended negotiations, silences that cost people millions. "That's my seat." Darla Whitmore finally looked up. She took her time with it. A slow, deliberate scan that started at his shoes and ended somewhere around his tie, the kind of appraisal designed to make a man feel like livestock at auction. His charcoal suit was bespoke, cut in Milan. His shoes were Italian and had never seen a sale rack. His watch told time the way a cathedral tells you something about whoever built it. None of it registered the way it should have. "No," she said. Just that. "No, not I think there's been a mistake or let me check my ticket. Just no, flat, final, like a door being shut in someone's face." Then she turned back to her phone. Evan stood in the aisle. Behind him, a line of boarding passengers pressed gently forward, aware that something was happening, not yet sure what. A businessman in row 4 craned his neck. A woman traveling alone in 1C pretended to adjust her overhead bag while watching the reflection in the window. "I have a boarding pass," Evan said. Patient. "2A. Would you like to see it?" Darla laughed. It was the kind of laugh that weaponized disbelief, sharp, performative, designed to land on the ears of everyone within 6 rows. She sat up straighter and raised her voice to ensure maximum coverage. Cute forgery. She waved a dismissive hand. "You people always try this. Go find the back where you belong." The cabin froze. Not all at once. It happened in a ripple. The man across the aisle lowering his newspaper first, then the couple in 3A and 3B looking up from their shared screen, then the businessman behind them, then the flight attendant frozen mid-stride in the forward galley. Her name tag said Jessica. She was 24 years old, had been working this route for 8 months, and had never been in a situation like this. Her training covered medical emergencies, unruly passengers, security threats. It did not cover this specific flavor of cruelty, delivered with such casual authority that it almost sounded reasonable. She clasped her hands together and looked between the woman in the seat and the man standing in the aisle. 3 phones came up simultaneously. Then a 4th. Evan reached into his jacket, unhurried, deliberate, and produced his boarding pass. He held it toward Darla the way you extend an olive branch, knowing the other person isn't going to take it, but offering it anyway, because the record matters. 2A, he said. Printed this morning. Would you like to see it? I would not. Darla crossed her legs at the ankle and adjusted her seat recline. I fly first class every week for 11 years, and I know exactly who belongs here and who doesn't. She paused for effect, glancing at the watching passengers as though inviting their agreement. I don't know how you ended up with that boarding pass, but I know it wasn't meant for you. The subtext was a sledgehammer dressed as a whisper. Jessica finally found her voice. Ma'am, if I could just see both. Get your supervisor, Darla said, without looking at her. I won't be questioned by a junior employee about something this obvious. Jessica retreated toward the galley, her expression caught somewhere between professionalism and distress. Evan lowered his boarding pass. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood, perfectly still, perfectly composed, in the aisle, while Darla narrated her victimhood to the watching cabin. He'd been here before. Different cities, different airports, different faces wearing the same expression. The assumptions came in all shapes, sometimes loud like this, sometimes quiet and even polite, which was almost worse. The investor who'd asked to speak to the actual CEO. The concierge who'd redirected him to the service entrance. The security guard at the industry gala who'd asked 3 times with escalating insistence to see his invitation. He'd learned patience in those moments, not the passive kind, not silence from fear or exhaustion, the active kind. The kind that waits for the right moment with the precision of a chess player who's already seen 12 moves ahead. Darla, satisfied by his stillness, interpreted it as defeat. "You should really know your place," she said, loud enough to be heard clearly, but quiet enough to seem almost sympathetic. It would save everyone so much trouble. She had no idea who she was talking to. She had no idea she was talking to the man who controlled the contract her husband's company could not survive losing. The lead supervisor arrived 2 minutes later. Her name was Carol, mid-50s, silver hair pulled back, 23 years with the airline. She had the bearing of someone who'd seen genuine crises and knew how to sort them from the theatrical ones. She took in the scene, the woman in 2A, the man in the aisle, the ring of watching passengers, the junior attendant hovering with pale-faced discomfort. She examined both boarding passes with the careful attention of someone who already knows what she's going to find and isn't pleased about it. "Ma'am," she said to Darla, her voice calibrated to professional neutrality. "This gentleman's boarding pass assigns him to seat 2A. Darla's response was a smile. Slow, certain, the smile of someone who has never once reached the edge of her influence and therefore doesn't believe it has one. "I'm not moving," she said. "Call security. My husband handles contracts worth more to this airline than you'll process in a decade. He'll sort this within the hour." She raised her phone, already unlocking it. "In fact, I'll have him start now." The supervisor glanced at Evan. An apology flickered behind her eyes, genuine, briefly, but her voice said something different. Something that made Evan's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Sir, perhaps while we resolve this, we could find you another seat." "I'll wait," Evan said, "while you call security." The calm in his voice seemed to unsettle Darla more than anger would have. She pressed her phone to her ear, but nobody had answered yet, so she narrated for the audience instead. "That's right," she announced to the watching passengers, as though providing live commentary. "A man tried to take my seat. I've asked for security. This is exactly why airlines need better screening protocols." The officers arrived in 4 minutes. They asked the right questions of the wrong person. Darla performed for them the way she'd been performing all morning, with the practiced ease of someone who has discovered, over decades, that a certain kind of tearful certainty tends to work. Her hand trembled, her voice caught. She used the word terrified 3 times and unsafe twice. All while her designer shoes remained crossed in the aisle, deliberately blocking Evan's path. It was a trap, baited with a $600 heel. Evan answered every question calmly. His voice didn't rise. His posture didn't shift. He produced his ID, his boarding pass, his confirmation email, and his frequent flyer status with the methodical efficiency of someone who has learned that documentation is armor. There was something about a man who refused to perform distress that made those around him uncomfortable, as if his composure was its own accusation, a mirror held up to the chaos around him. The security officers exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, We're going to need you to step into the aisle while we sort this out. Evan nodded once and moved, carefully, deliberately stepping sideways to avoid contact with Darla's outstretched legs, twisting his body in a way that was precisely as humiliating as she'd intended. Darla's smile widened. "Make sure you check his bags carefully," she called out, loud enough for the rows around her to hear as they guided Evan toward the front. He seemed very unstable during boarding. Evan walked, back straight, briefcase at his side, pace unhurried. He'd been here before. He'd always been here before. The security office was a small room with institutional lighting and the particular silence of spaces designed to make people feel guilty about things they haven't done. Metal table, 3 chairs, a two-way mirror along one wall. Evan sat across from the 2 officers and answered their questions with the precise, unhurried confidence of a man who is entirely unafraid of the truth. While they questioned him, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Once, twice, steadily accumulating, like water rising. "You can check that if you need to," the older officer offered. Evan removed his phone and looked at the screen. A cascade of notifications, alerts from his communications team, messages from his executive board, news headlines already forming around the incident. He placed it face down on the table, not from indifference, from strategy. "Gentlemen," he said, folding his hands, "I'd like to ask you something directly. Are you also questioning Mrs. Whitmore, who refused to vacate a seat that federal boarding protocol requires her to vacate? Because if you're not, I think we should discuss why that is." Neither officer responded directly, which was, itself, a response. Evan looked at the two-way glass. Behind it, he knew, people were watching. There was always someone watching. The question was never whether they saw, it was whether they chose to act on what they'd seen. His phone buzzed again, face down, vibrating against the metal table like a heartbeat. By the time they released him through the service corridor, the story was already shaping itself online. CEO escorted off flight following first-class dispute. Tech executive removed from aircraft. Passenger describes threatening encounter. Witness video. Man removed from first class after alleged harassment. The clips circulating were 3 to 4 minutes long, carefully selected. They showed Evan standing over Darla, his voice, stripped of context, made to sound hard. Her expression, carefully composed for the camera, made to look frightened. Everything before it, Darla's first words, the deliberate blocking of the aisle, the 11-minute performance before security arrived, had been edited away with surgical precision. His communications director, Sandra Chen, called before he'd cleared the terminal. They timed it perfectly, she said, without preamble. Released to 3 outlets simultaneously, with pre-written commentary ready to go. This wasn't reactive. This was prepared, I know. The board is nervous. Chairman Davis has called twice. Partners are watching the coverage and going quiet. I know that too. Evan. A pause. We can manage this the easy way. Issue a statement. Express regret for the misunderstanding. Reinstate their contract. The board would support that approach. By tomorrow morning, no. The word landed with a kind of finality that Sandra had heard before. She recognized it as the voice he used when a negotiation was over. "Get me everything," Evan said. "All of it. Define all of it. The full documentation on Richard Whitmore's firm. Every discrimination complaint, every buried settlement, every instance where money changed hands to make a problem disappear. I want the pattern, not the incident. And I want the airline's internal communications, their security footage, employee statements, emails between their executive team, and anyone connected to the Whitmores in the 6 hours following the incident." "Silence on the line. That's aggressive," Sandra said finally. "They chose aggressive," Evan said. "They chose it the moment Darla decided my seat belonged to her, and they doubled down every time I gave them a chance to stop. The complaint, the edited videos, the coordinated press, the fake witness statements, none of that is reactive. That's a machine. And it's been running for a long time. He paused. I want to see the whole machine. He slid into the back of the waiting car. Through the window, the terminal receded. Reporters at the curb aimed cameras at the car as it pulled away. One woman ran 3 steps alongside it, microphone raised. Evan watched the airport disappear in the rearview mirror. He switched his phone notifications back on. The alerts came in a flood. He read every one. The hotel suite became a command center by 6 p.m. Laptops covered every surface. Empty coffee cups accumulated near the windows. Sandra paced the width of the room in the way she always did when she was thinking, a slow diagonal that took her past the television and back. Marcus Thompson, his chief legal officer, had claimed the dining table and covered it in printed documents, stacking and restacking them with the focused energy of a man building a case. The television played silently in the background. At one point, Darla appeared on screen, seated in a television studio with carefully composed distress, tissues within reach. The crawler below read, "Passenger speaks out about terrifying mid-flight confrontation." Marcus muted it before Evan could hear her voice. "They're playing this perfectly," he said, "framing you as the executive who weaponized a contract to bully a woman. Victim, villain, the narrative is clean and it's spreading fast." "And the real footage?" Evan asked. Sandra looked up from her laptop. "We have confirmation from 6 passengers. Full, unedited video. 3 have agreed to release it. 2 more are waiting to see if others go first." She paused. "There's also a flight attendant, not Jessica, one of the others, who's willing to talk. Anonymously, for now. She says there was pressure from airline management to accept Darla's version of events before the plane even landed. How much pressure? The kind that comes from above her pay grade and below the CEO's. Evan moved to the window. San Francisco spread out below him in its usual indifferent beauty fog threading between glass towers, the bay a flat gray sheet in the distance. Somewhere in that city, Richard Whitmore was probably in a room like this one, doing exactly what Evan was doing. Building the next morning's story. "What's in the pattern file?" Evan asked. Marcus opened the thickest folder on the table, more than we expected. Whitmore Group has settled 11 discrimination complaints in the last 9 years, all sealed. In 8 of the 11 cases, the complainants signed NDAs as a condition of settlement. In 3 cases, there are allegations of retaliation after internal reports were filed. He turned a page. Their contractor selection data is particularly damning. Minority-owned businesses in their vendor pool show a contract award rate 43% below the industry average, despite comparable bid pricing and qualifications. "That's not coincidence," Sandra said. "No," Marcus agreed. "That's policy. It just looks like pattern when you see it all at once." He closed the folder. "The question is whether we release this now, in response to their narrative, or whether we wait." Evan turned from the window. "We wait." For what? For them to overextend. He crossed to the table and looked at the stacked folders. Right now, they think they're winning. They think I'll either capitulate or come out swinging too early, and they'll use either response to confirm their story. He picked up Marcus's folder and set it down again. Let them think the edited video worked. Let them think the board pressure is working. Let them push. And then we release everything. All at once. Every angle of footage, every internal email, every buried complaint, every statistical analysis. Not a response, an exposure. He looked at his team, not of one incident, of the whole system. The room was quiet for a moment. "If we do this," Marcus said carefully, "there's collateral damage. Their firm loses contracts, share prices drop, innocent employees face layoffs. I know, and you're comfortable with that? Evan was quiet for a long moment. Every year, Whitmore Group awards contracts in ways that exclude qualified minority businesses. Every year, they settle complaints from employees who've been discriminated against and seal those people into silence. The collateral damage of not exposing them is already happening. It's just happening quietly, to people without the platform to make noise about it. Marcus nodded slowly. Set the timeline, Evan said. We release at 9 a.m. Eastern. Markets open, morning shows live. Everything goes simultaneously. Media contacts, regulatory agencies, financial watchdogs, shareholder groups. He looked at Sandra. And the airline's internal emails go to aviation regulators 30 minutes before the general release. That's a signal, she said. Yes, it is. He allowed a slight pause. Get some rest. Tomorrow starts early. The first attempt to sleep lasted 40 minutes at 2:17 a.m. His phone lit up the ceiling of the darkened suite with the particular brightness of an emergency. Sandra's text came first. Urgent. New video released. Turn on any news channel. Now. Evan grabbed the remote. CNN's banner read, exclusive, new footage shows aggressive confrontation on Flight 2387. The clip was different from the earlier edits. This one was technically sophisticated, his movements slowed to appear menacing, his voice pitched lower and louder through processing, Darla's provocations completely removed. What remained was 40 seconds of a large man standing over a seated woman, his body language stripped of its original context and reassembled as threat. Marcus's message was already waiting. Fox News picked it up. MSNBC running it straight to air. No fact-checking. Someone with resources timed this for maximum spread, West Coast sleeping, East Coast morning shows not live yet. Minimum resistance window. Evan sat on the edge of the bed and watched his carefully rebuilt credibility begin to erode again in real time. Comments cascading beneath the video. Analysts who had defended him 6 hours ago now questioning the footage they hadn't seen before. A crisis communications expert on CNN using phrases like hidden aggression and pattern of behavior. His phone rang. Legal counsel. The airline just dropped another statement, his counsel said without greeting. Following new evidence regarding the incident on Flight 2387, we are temporarily suspending Mr. Cole's flying privileges pending a comprehensive safety review. The comfort and security of all passengers remains our highest priority. A pause. Richard Whitmore's fingerprints are on every frame of that clip. The distribution, the timing, the immediate legal filing, this was waiting in reserve. They let us think we'd won the first round, then hit us when our guard was down. Evan stood and walked to the window. San Francisco glimmered below. Indifferent. Beautiful. Unchanged. They wanted me to react, he said. They're counting on it, then we don't. He watched a taxi wind through the empty 2 a.m. streets, its headlights cutting through the fog with steady, purposeful progress. Something about that image, the unhurried certainty of it, settled something in him. Move the timeline up, we go at 6 a.m. Pacific, not 9 Eastern. That's 3 hours from now, I know. Is the package ready? It's been ready since midnight. Then we go at 6. He paused. And Marcus, add the new clip to the dossier. Full technical analysis. I want every edit artifact documented, every metadata discrepancy logged, every frame of manipulation cataloged. Another pause. They gave us the rope, we'll let them hang with it. He set the phone down and stood at the window for a long time, watching the city breathe. At 4:47 a.m., he sat down at the desk and typed 3 words to his assembled team. Release everything. 6:03 a.m. The first wave, the unedited cabin footage, hit every major platform simultaneously, 6 different angles, the earliest beginning from the moment Darla first spoke. Crystal clear audio captured her exact words. "Seats like this aren't for people like you." The footage ran uninterrupted through everything. Her deliberate blocking of the aisle, her performance for security, her smirk as they led Evan away. The internet caught fire in the way it occasionally does when genuine, undeniable evidence appears after a carefully constructed lie, not the performative outrage of opinion, but the specific electric energy of people watching a false narrative collapse in real time. Within 12 minutes, the hashtag was trending in 14 countries. 6:17 a.m. The second wave. Richard Whitmore's internal emails hit financial channels first. CNBC cut to breaking news. The emails were worse than the video, not because they were surprising, but because they were so thoroughly, carelessly documented. Richard had apparently never considered the possibility that his words might one day be read by people who were not on his side. Make sure Cole understands his place. Use whatever leverage necessary. I don't care how it gets done. Make this go away. The timestamps destroyed him. The retaliatory campaign had begun before the plane pushed back from the gate. 6:31 a.m. The third wave. The regulatory notifications went out. SEC, FA, Department of Transportation, the airline's internal communications, the pressure applied to crew members, the executive-level decisions made in the hours following the incident, the communications between airline management and representatives of Whitmore Group landed in the inboxes of 3 federal agencies and 2 congressional oversight offices simultaneously. Whitmore Group stock triggered its first circuit breaker at 6:44 a.m. By 7:02 a.m., the pattern was emerging. Financial journalists, given the statistical analysis of Whitmore Group's contractor selection data, began pulling threads. Past discrimination complaints resurfaced. Industry watchers noted the systematic exclusion of minority-owned businesses from major contracts. Former employees, who had signed NDAs and stayed silent for years, began calling lawyers. 3 of them called Evan's legal team directly. 7:18 a.m. The airline issued a new statement. It was 300 words long and contained more genuine accountability than most corporate statements manage in 3,000. The executives involved in pressuring crew members were suspended. A partnership with Cole Innovations for diversity and inclusion initiatives was announced. The ban on Evans' flying privileges was lifted, effective immediately, with a formal apology. 7:33 a.m., more passengers came forward. More footage. More angles. A flight attendant, no longer anonymous, gave a recorded statement to 2 journalists simultaneously. Another passenger produced audio of a conversation with airline management that had occurred while the plane was still taxiing. Each new piece of evidence tightened the net. 7:45 a.m. federal agents arrived at Whitmore Group headquarters. Evan watched it on the hotel television. Black SUVs in a precise row, men and women in dark suits carrying document boxes past the gleaming lobby signage. Richard's face appeared briefly in a satellite interview, sweat visible, voice clipped. These allegations are completely false. This is a coordinated attack. They cut to his own emails beside his face. He stopped talking. 8:01 a.m. The breaking point. The headline appeared across every major outlet simultaneously. Federal agencies reviewing Whitmore Group conduct. Evan sat in the leather armchair by the window and watched San Francisco fill with morning light. The day had barely started. She found him at 3:15 p.m. Evan was standing near the concierge desk, confirming his departure arrangements when he heard the revolving door and turned, instinctively, toward the disturbance. Darla Whitmore looked like a woman who had survived something she hadn't expected to survive. The composure that had been her armor on the plane, the practiced poise, the social weaponry smile, was gone entirely. Her designer outfit was wrinkled. Her hair, usually immaculate, had the look of someone who had stopped caring about it hours ago. Her mascara had made its journey down her face and dried there. She moved through the lobby with the forward momentum of desperation. "Mr. Cole," her voice cracked on the second word. "Please, 5 minutes." The concierge staff tensed. Hotel security took a step forward. Evan raised a hand, "It's fine," and gestured toward the seating area by the large windows, visible from the front desk, open to the lobby. Not private. That was deliberate. They sat across from each other, a small audience gathered at careful distance, guests pretending to examine their phones, staff finding reasons to be nearby. Evan noticed several phones come up to record. Darla didn't notice, or didn't care anymore. "The country club suspended our membership this morning." Her hands twisted together in her lap. "My phone, I have 40 messages I haven't been able to answer. My sister told me not to contact her. The children's school called." Her voice broke on that one. She pressed through it. "Richard's lawyers are telling us that the federal investigation could last years. Years. Our friends, people we've known for 20 years, are not returning calls." Evan sat very still. "We can make this right financially," she said. "Whatever number you need. Richard will reinstate the contract, plus damages, plus whatever it takes. Just tell us what it takes." She looked at him with an expression he recognized. Though it took him a moment to name it, it was the same expression people wore when they had exhausted every other option and arrived, finally, at the truth. Except in Darla's case, the truth was that she was only here because the other options were gone. "Mrs. Whitmore," Evan said quietly, "what's happening to you right now isn't something I have the power to call off, even if I wanted to. The federal investigations, the regulatory reviews, the shareholder actions, those belong to the institutions they belong to. I released documentation. What those institutions do with it is their decision. But you could say something." Her voice sharpened with a remnant of the old authority. "You have the platform. One statement from you, saying it was a misunderstanding, that you don't want this to go further. It wasn't a misunderstanding." The words landed gently. That was what made them final. Darla stared at him. "I was protecting what was mine." "You were defending an entitlement," Evan said. "That seat was never yours. The authority you used in that cabin wasn't earned. You wielded it because you'd always been able to, and because in your experience, certain people stepped aside when you deployed it." He paused. "I didn't step aside. And everything that happened after that, every escalation, every edited video, every false complaint, every press release Richard's team drafted, that was your choice. You had opportunities to stop, you chose not to." Darla's chin trembled. "So you wanted to destroy us?" "I wanted my seat," Evan said simply. "Everything else followed from your choices, not mine." She looked at the table between them. Her hands had stopped twisting. Something in her seemed to have gone very quiet, not peace, not acceptance, but the specific exhaustion of someone who has run out of fight. "So that's it," she said finally. "There's nothing. There's accountability," Evan said, "which is not nothing. It's actually quite significant, even when it doesn't feel that way from where you're sitting." He stood, unhurried. "I'm sorry for the pain your family is experiencing. Genuinely. But I won't apologize for standing in an aisle and asking for what was mine." He adjusted his jacket. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore." He walked toward the side exit. Behind him, he heard her gathering her things, the small, scattered sounds of someone picking themselves up from the floor of something. He didn't turn around. Through the lobby's front windows, he could see the reporters on the sidewalk, the cameras, the waiting crowd. That was her gauntlet to walk. He had a different exit. The airline's headquarters gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its glass facade reflecting a sky that had finally cleared after days of coastal fog. The conference room was full. Journalists from financial press, aviation industry outlets, major broadcast networks, online publications that specialized in the specific intersection of corporate accountability and public spectacle. Camera operators had claimed the perimeter. A dais at the front held a podium, a row of executive chairs, and, at the center of the long table, a single place set apart from the others. Evan arrived with his legal team and took his seat without ceremony. The airline's CEO, Marcus Thompson, not to be confused with Evan's own Marcus, a coincidence that had confused several reporters, stood at the podium with the bearing of a man who understood that the next 30 minutes would define his tenure. Good afternoon. He paused to let the cameras settle. We are here today to address the events of Flight 2387 from Chicago to San Francisco. But more than that, we are here to address our own failures. Because what happened on that plane was not simply a passenger dispute. It was a failure of our systems, our training, our instincts, and our judgment. The room was very quiet. Mr. Cole was subjected to discriminatory treatment, false accusations, and public humiliation, first by another passenger, and subsequently by our own crew and management team, who allowed themselves to be influenced by a version of events that they should have questioned. We acted without adequate investigation. We suspended a man's flying privileges without evidence. We chose, when it was easier, to believe the wrong person. He turned toward Evan. On behalf of our entire organization, I want to offer an apology that is not qualified by business considerations, not conditioned on legal outcomes, and not designed for public relations purposes. A pause. Mr. Cole, we were wrong. You were right, and we failed you in a way that we will spend significant time and resources ensuring we never fail anyone else. The formal reinstatement followed. Then the announcement of policy changes, bias training, revised incident protocols, an independent passenger advocacy board. Then the partnership with Cole Innovations for diversity and inclusion initiatives, a multi-million-dollar commitment that surprised even several members of Evan's own team. A reporter stood. Mr. Cole, your company's stock has risen 18% since this morning's disclosures. Do you feel vindicated? Evan leaned toward his microphone. This was never about stock prices. It was about standing in an aisle with a boarding pass and being told I didn't belong there. He paused. What I feel is responsibility, because I have a platform that most people in similar situations don't have. And what matters isn't that I personally won, it's whether this changes anything for the next person who gets told to go find the back. In the Whitmores, another reporter pressed. That matter is in the hands of appropriate institutions, Evans said, which is exactly where it belongs. The terminal at San Francisco International was the same terminal it had always been. The same carpet, the same fluorescent hum, the same procession of wheeled luggage and unhurried announcements. But something moved differently through it now. Evan walked toward his gate at the measured pace he always kept. People noticed him, quietly, the way people notice someone they've seen do something significant. A few nodded. A gate agent, 3 gates from his own, found reasons to look up and away. A family of 4 stopped their argument mid-sentence when he passed, then resumed it once he was by. His own gate agent straightened as he approached. Good evening, Mr. Cole. Her voice carried the particular warmth of someone who means it. "We've upgraded you to first class this evening. Complimentary, of course, with our apologies for this morning's inconvenience." She paused, though inconvenience seems like the wrong word. "It does," Evan agreed. "But thank you." He walked the jet bridge. The same jet bridge, in theory, the same ribbed walls and faint hydraulic smell, but the moment at the end of it, stepping through the aircraft door to be greeted by name, by genuine smiles, by flight attendants who met his eyes without the complicated calculation of this morning, felt different in a way he allowed himself to feel for a moment before setting it aside. He settled into seat 2A. His seat. No drama attended the moment. He removed his laptop, accepted a glass of water, exchanged a brief nod with the businessman in 2B who had clearly recognized him and had the grace not to make anything of it. The cabin filled around him, the door sealed. Then the captain's voice came over the intercom, departing from the usual script. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Before we begin our departure procedures, I'd like to take a moment that isn't part of our standard announcement. A perceptible shift in the cabin, people looking up, the particular attention that arrives when something breaks from routine. Mr. Evan Cole is traveling with us this evening in first class. Many of you will recognize his name from today's news coverage. What you may know less about is that Mr. Cole's actions have already initiated policy changes at this airline and opened investigations into industry practices that have caused harm to people without the platform to address them. He spent this morning sitting in a security office answering questions he shouldn't have been asked." A pause. "He spent the rest of it making sure no one else has to." The cabin applauded, not the polite, obligatory kind that follows announcements. The real kind, the spontaneous, sustained kind that rises without being prompted, that means something different from the same sounds made on cue. Evan looked out the window. The tarmac. The ground crews. The other planes in their patient rows. The ordinary machinery of departure, indifferent to everything that had happened in the 14 hours since he'd first walked down a different jet bridge and found a woman in his seat. A flight attendant appeared at his elbow, smiling. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, Mr. Cole?" "Just water," he said. "Thank you." The engine spooled up beneath him, that familiar rising note that meant the world was about to get smaller. The plane rolled away from the gate with its usual unhurried authority, taxied, waited. Then the runway opened up ahead, a long, lit corridor pointing east, and they accelerated. Evan watched the lights blur and streak as they gathered speed. His phone showed one final notification before he switched it to airplane mode. Richard Whitmore resignation confirmed. Criminal charges referred to federal prosecutors. Effective immediately. He set the phone down on the armrest. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. San Francisco spread out below. The bay, the bridges, the hills falling into evening shadow. The 10,000 points of light that meant 10,000 people going about their lives. Most of them unaware that something had shifted today in the structures that govern them, in the contracts that did or didn't get awarded, in the voices that did or didn't get silenced. The clouds rose around the plane, and then they were above them, and the sky opened up, deep blue going to black at the edges, the first stars appearing with the specific clarity that only exists above weather. Evan reclined slightly. He thought, briefly, about the woman who had looked at him and seen only something that didn't belong. He thought about the investor who had asked to speak to the actual CEO, the concierge, the security guard, the board member with the surprised expression, the 11 settled complaints, sealed behind NDAs, voices traded for silence and money. He thought about the 3 former Whitmore Group employees who had called his legal team this morning, not because of him specifically, but because something had finally cracked open enough to let light in, and they decided to step into it. That was the thing Darla had never understood. It was never about the seat. The seat was just the moment when everything that had been quiet for too long decided it was done being quiet. One boarding pass held steady in the aisle while someone told him he didn't belong there. The engines settled into their cruising note. The flight attendant moved through the dimmed cabin. Someone in the rows behind him was already asleep. Evan opened his laptop and returned to the contracts he'd been reviewing before all of this started. 40,000 feet, clear skies, good tailwinds, Chicago in 4 hours. He had work to do.